Thank you very much. I think you've all heard me quite a lot today, so I'll try to be not take too much of your time. And I would like to present to you some of my research, which I've been doing over the past few years. A research that started with the help of some students from here, from the Hebrew University, and continues with colleagues of mine here at the audience. And it's a great pleasure to have this conference at the Truman Institute. And I'd like to thank Brewery Abiton Ashkeloni and the Center for Christianity for supporting this, and also the School of for Musalaha and all the various donors who have been helping us. Our question today, we are focusing on identity, and I decided to look specifically at language. In particular, what's the role of language in the formation of ethnic, religious, and national identities? It sounds almost like an obvious question that you might reply to instantly with, obviously it's very important. And indeed, when you look at language at the nexus of identity, reading, for example, at Noam Chomsky's words, he wrote beautifully, very recently, he said in a conference, when a language disappears, a lot is lost. A language is a repository of cultural wealth. We are losing those treasures every time a language disappears. And for the people themselves, they are losing their identity. If English disappeared, we would lose our cultural identity. So, what's the importance of language for the Palestinian Christians that we are dealing with? It's almost obvious. Looking back at history, looking back at recent history, it played one of the most important roles in the entire revival of the nation and the language. You're familiar with the Nahda. This is a picture I took in Jaffa, and I particularly like it because it has a spelling mistake. And but it's one, you know how in Jaffa there are many streets with just numbers, and this was a local initiative. Someone changed the name of the street and put up his own sign and called it the revival. The revival, the renaissance of the Arabic language was part of the most important turning point in the history of Palestine over the past 100 years. Reviving the Arabic language was a big project that started in the 19th century. And I'll just give you a couple of examples. Christians played a very important role in it. A very famous person in that movement was Boutros Bustani, and this is from a lecture he gave in Beirut in 1859. He said, "Arabic is one of the greatest languages in the world, and were it not for the fear that I would be asked to provide conclusive proof, I would have said that it was a language that was revealed to our father Adam in the earthly paradise. The reverence Arabs have for their language and its past means it cannot be changed like the habit of its people, even though various nations are actively spreading their languages, and some Arabs have regrettably become more inclined toward foreign languages at the expense of their own sacred mother tongue." We all know what he's talking about. This is the middle of the 19th century, and El-Bustani was talking about Arabic giving way. We just heard a lecture about education. So education in the Christian schools throughout the Holy Land was done mainly in Christian institutions in foreign languages. So he was mourning that. And we find a very similar attitude also in Jaffa. the reason I'm focusing on Jaffa is because this will be my story today, but look at this quote from the newspaper Philistine from 1913, where the author complained that the foreign schools are many and they work at dividing our minds for the sake of knowledge, just as they have divided our kingdom in politics. This is, by the way, you wouldn't recognize Jaffa, would you? This is the days when it still had a wall. It's even before St. Peter's Church was erected at the top. But you may be familiar with this street here. Today it's called Yefet Street. I think it was called El Khilwa for a long time. And this was a street along which most of the foreign schools were later on built. Jaffa was a center for the Renaissance of Arabic poetry, Arabic writing. Before 1948, of course, but also after 1948, Jaffa remained a very important focal of writing about poetry that was written about Jaffa. Jaffa became the symbol, the oranges of Jaffa became symbol of the Nakba itself. Here are the old Christian schools, some of them at least, not all of them. And you can see them here in various parts of this Yefet Street, an Anglican school, a French school, another part of this French school of Saint-Joseph. And what does it look like today? Let's move on. So today, it looks exactly the same. There are still Christian schools operating in Jaffa. They're still very popular. But the main language of instruction is Arabic. They also teach other languages, but Arabic is the main language taught in those schools. Jaffa in the 19th century, Jaffa today, and we're shifting our focus now to look just at Jaffa for the next whatever minutes that I have. So what is it like today? In December 2012, I went with a group of students of mine to visit the various communities of Jaffa. In one of the churches, this is a very small church, Anan. This is a Melkite church, or a Roman Catholic church. This is a church that there are, how many people? 650 people are members of this congregation, 130 families. So it's very small. And Abuna Karim, that you see over there, is the head of the congregation. He himself is from the Galilee. He was educated abroad. And this all matters. And we were sitting there in his church, and we asked him questions about the community. And one of the questions that we were talking about was about language. We've heard that before, that many of the children in Jaffa, but not just in Jaffa, we mentioned earlier other mixed cities, but children who can no longer read and write in Arabic. So we asked him if it matters that they can't read and write in Arabic. And he told us that it matters a lot. It matters to him a lot because the children their religion is affected by the fact that they can't read and write Arabic. They can't take part in the prayers, he said to us. But no worries, he had a solution. And this is what he pulled out. Sorry, these are the kids they are the focus of this entire conversation. And this is what he showed me. That's very good that you're laughing. Thank you. This is the Lord's Prayer in Arabic, but written in Hebrew characters. Now, some of you who know me know that I'm a medievalist by training, and when I first saw this, I was like, wow, I haven't seen anything like this since my material from the Middle Ages. It's so exciting. What we know, and older, I think in a conference that Ori was presenting this, she showed it and asked the people what it was, and they would say, oh, it must be Judeo-Arabic. This is medieval Hebrew script. Like this, for example, Maimonides' text, written in Judeo-Arabic. But no, this is not Judeo-Arabic. This text was written by Arab priest for his congregation that no longer is able to read and write Arabic. So, back to the children, I want to show you the next thing. We went to visit the church and meet the congregation and talk a little bit more about language and what it means. So, bear with me for 1 second. I'll show you a very, very brief film and just a part from it. Where
كما يذوب الشمع من أعلام وجه
Could you hear anything at all from this? So this was Easter, beginning of Easter prayer, not in the Holy Sepulchre. I didn't go to anywhere special or to the center of the ritual. I stayed in Jaffa and we went to church, and this was a group of people praying, singing first in Arabic and then repeating the exact same text in Greek. I'm moving on to the next part of... we wanted to see how they use... I'll skip most of it, but just the end of it. The kid was reading for us the creed in Arabic, using the text, and in the end, I discovered what I didn't realize before. You know, I thought, okay, he can't read prayer book in Arabic, but it never occurred to me that he can't write his name in Arabic. The reason I asked him was he's one of twins. They are called Eve and Yvette, and as someone who is called Merav, I always wonder, you know, how in Arabic, in what way would you write your name? And why would someone give his child a name that, you know, the letter doesn't exist normally in Arabic? I mean, this is an adaptation. So I was just asking him, just out of curiosity, how he writes his name in Arabic. And then he told me that he can't write his name in Arabic. But our question is, I want to tell you before I leave this story, to share with you just a few notes that I took from my field notes from that same visit in the church. So I noted to myself that the children most of them were wearing new clothes. All the boys had new haircuts. None of the children held textbooks, and they didn't have text at all, including the Hebrew text or those pages. They had none of them. Most of the children looked very, very bored. They didn't know any of the songs, so they didn't take any part in the actual prayer. What they did do instead was to walk with the priest and do all sorts of little missions that he gave them in the prayer itself. They seem to me very much in their clothing, in the way they are dressed, in the way the shorts that they wear, they seemed very distinct in the environment of the neighborhood of Ajami, where they go out. You know, when you come, you follow them outside into the street, and you see that they are different from the Muslim environment. They are very clearly, distinctly different, looking different, wearing shorts, and mothers with high heels, and looking very modern. Would you call it looking Israeli? Not entirely. I was I was looking for a better photo than that, because but for example, hairstyle was, but in general, was not like the common Israeli haircut that Jewish Israeli children would have in Tel Aviv, in the nearby Tel Aviv city. Oh, sorry. So, oh, something bad happened here. I'm very sorry about this. Let's take a look at this. I'm not going to analyze this. When I first found this text, I was introduced to Dr. Ori Shachmon, who was very delighted to see this. And we started analyzing this together. The question I'm dealing with here today is, what does it tell us about language? Does it matter that these children no longer read and write Arabic? And can we call this, let's look at this prayer, and can we call it a language? This was one of the questions that Ori and I have been asking ourselves, and hoping to have in a forthcoming publication to deal with this more closely. Can we call this a language? I'm not sure we have a positive answer to this. This is, I think Ori would describe it as a very non-systematic language. There is a, she suggested we may call it a diglossic situation of children who are, language is about to disappear. It's just a middle station. But the diglossic situation means that these are people who speak one language and read and write a different language. That happens in many different places. In fact, Arabic, you can think of it as a classic diglossic language in which you have one spoken language and a different written language. So there's no big deal about it. You could argue that this is not really a language, that this is just a middle station on the way until it disappears completely and becomes something else. On the other hand, my argument for thinking about it as a real language was because we started looking around. We said, okay, this community deserves closer look. Let's start analyzing it a little bit closer. So, do we have other texts? The answer is yes. First of all, we have texts, other religious texts. I mentioned earlier that the child was reading the Creed, and here he was reading this text that again provided by the priest. So we have the most important Christian texts written for them in this, maybe what we can call a new language. Another one is when we find secular texts. So, for example, we met an actor who, like the other kids, was sent to Hebrew-speaking schools, and he speaks Arabic fluently, but he can't read and write Arabic. He wanted to act a part in Arabic. So he had someone else reading to him the text in Arabic, and he wrote it down himself. He actually called it our third language. This is his term for that middle language or third language that he's been using. Where else did we find it? We found it in the Scouts. Children need to learn certain songs. They definitely need to know the anthem, so they need to learn it. Improvising texts were given to them to practice this. The Scouts' Oath. And here you can see a very interesting case. We went to observe the Scouts' children. Now this is no longer the same community. This is the Orthodox Scouts. There are in fact 2 Orthodox Scouts in Jaffa. This is one of them. And in this case, the children were talking just in Arabic. The whole activity was done in Arabic. But when the scout guide, what do you call it? The scout guide was asked them, can you write down what's bothering you? So they all sat down and started writing. All of them wrote in Hebrew or in a mixture of Hebrew mixed with that middle language. So here a boy called Jiris says that what bothers me is that we are doing starch sta'id all the time. So he's writing it just as he hears the words. And he even put diacritical marks so it would be very clear what he's just written. This Orthodox group I found very, very interesting. And again, looking at them a little bit more closely, trying to see what's going on to this community. Where do they go to school? And again, when I asked the question, does language matter? I wanted to see what it looks like from the school's perspective, from the parents' perspective. I will not be able to go into all the details here, but just a little bit more. So first of all, I asked the Scouts manager to give us a list of names of the people. This is, people who know my work know that I have a little obsession with names and the way names, I've been writing about the way names have been changing inside the Orthodox community in Jerusalem over the years. So I was particularly interested to know what happens with names here. This was just fantastic. Looking at the names, you find that the majority of you can see here the male population, most of the boys, this is a sample of 60 names, but in that 60 names we see the vast majority, as you would probably predict, have Western names, and only less than 40% have Arab names. And what was very interesting for me, extremely interesting, was that there were no Hebrew Israeli pronounced names amongst those names. You could have had, and the reason I know it is because they gave me the names not written in English but in Hebrew. So when they wrote Ibrahim, I could know that it's not Avi or Avraham or whatever other sort of way they might have. Or the same with you can't really tell when they give you the list of names in another language. So even more interesting, and this brings me back to a point I made a little bit earlier in passing, is that when it comes to names, girls' names are always more indicative. They always lead the revolution in everywhere. I mean, this is simple. I can explain the reason for it. It makes sense. The male traditions are much closer, more closed. Fathers want their children to have their names. So there's almost like an expectancy, a demand that you name your son, firstborn son, after your father. So you have more traditional names amongst the boys. But look at the girls' names. The most shocking thing is they have obviously even less Arab names than the boys. There's only a joint name, a girl called Eliana or Eliana, or that could be both. So it's both an Arabic and Hebrew name. But I think the most interesting fact is that I have only one Christian name. This is, if I compare it to Jerusalem 100 years before, 40 years before, 30 years before, is absolutely shocking. So when we come back to religion, language, we are in a nexus of language and religion. I'm just about to come back and conclude with getting back into language. This is the list of the girls. Yes. So, does language matter? To all those aspects, national, ethnic, and religious perspectives. Looking at the school that the kids go to, this is one of them. There are two main schools that the children of Jaffa go to. One of them is Itamar Ben Avi. The Weizmann school is very, very similar. I was looking at the school's vision. Itamar Ben Avi school see great importance in, I'm sorry, I was really translating it literally so you would get the message of exactly what's written in that. So it is great importance in, one, educating its pupils in the spirit of Jewish Israeli culture while exposing them to Hebrew works. Yetzirah. You must have a better word. Emphasizing the richness of the Hebrew language and its value as a bridge between all schools' attendants. This is open to not just Jews, assuming they know most of the children in this school are not. This is a really, really, really mixed school. The third point is strengthening the love of the land, Ahavat Haaretz, and Jewish sense of belonging and identity. So Jewish sense of belonging and identity definitely matters to school. Language definitely matters to school. In this school, they do not teach Arabic at all. And I thought it was actually quite interesting to see that even in the symbol of the school, it's not just Ahavat Haaretz, it's not just the love of the land, but it's the love of the entire land of Israel, as you can see up there at the map of Israel. So, language matters very much to school. I'm not satisfied with this. I still want to know if language matters, and it's definitely played a huge part at the time of the rising of nationalism and the nation state. We think about language partially as Israeli Jews think about the revival of the Hebrew language. I'm really passing this on to you, but when I asked, and here I'd like to end, when I asked Abuna Karim what will be the future, if he's worried about the future of the community in Jaffa, his small, tiny little community, he said he was not at all worried. He said the only difference is, in 15 years' time, he said, in 15-year time, I will lead the prayer in Hebrew. I'd like to end this presentation then with the words of Abuna Karim, and by asking you, I'm passing this question therefore to you. Is language as important as it seemed to be when the nation states were created? And is it important for religious identity? Thank you very much.
Please, comments, questions? Yes.
Just a short comment as a service for the people who are not Israelis around this table. Itamar Ben-Avi is regarded in Israeli history as the first son who was raised in Hebrew. He was the son of Ben Yehuda, and his name, Ben-Avi, means the son of Eliezer Ben Yehuda. So it's the best example of irony that I can think of is that the Arabic kids in Jaffa are going to Itamar Ben-Avi's school. I mean, if they would go to Theodor Herzl, it was less ironic from their linguistic viewpoint. Thank you.
Yes, please.
I would like to get the bottom line of your talk.
That's what you're here for, right?
Yes. Is the bottom line that the Arab minority in Israel, say the Christian Arab Palestinian minority in Israel, is assimilable, is assimilating, is capable or in process of assimilation. I give you, my thesis is Arabs in Israel, Christians, Druze.
Can you speak to this when they come?
Sorry.
Not everyone was here. So Professor Sami Smucha.
My thesis is that Arabs in Israel, regardless of their religion, Druze, Christians, Muslims, are not a assimilable minority. The state does not want to assimilate them. They don't want to assimilate. They are part of the Palestinian people, which will not let them assimilate. Also, the whole context we have to take. So what we are seeing here is marginal to the main thing, which is lack of assimilation. Today, somebody, I think you mentioned that we would like to see the Jews, how they are successful. We do something the same. The Jews in the diaspora were assimilable minorities. In the United States and in Russia, in the Soviet Union, they lost their language almost completely. The Jews in America today, they don't have a language, no Jewish language, not Hebrew, not Yiddish, not Ladino, nothing, English only. They were willing to sacrifice their culture, and the core of the culture is language, I agree with you, for social mobility. Because if you want really social mobility, you give up your cultural distinctiveness. Arabs in Israel, they are not willing, even the Christians are not willing to sacrifice their cultural distinctiveness for social mobility, and the Jews will not let them. It's going both ways. So what I think what you are saying, we have to put it in perspective. All this kind of phenomenon, and we find this much more among the Druze than among say the Christians, because they are more affiliated with the Jews, more associated with the Jews. But still, you have to evaluate their importance. Their importance is still very peripheral.
Just to correct, I said exactly the opposite about assimilation. I said that they were not assimilating. That's exactly the point. In the Middle Ages, there was Judeo-Arabic, but did the Jews disappear? No. That's exactly where I'm proposing to think differently about. We are all captured by the idea of language in the nation state. That's what I suddenly realized when I started working on this. That maybe it's not as important. But you are right. I'll just
It's assimilated country.
Okay. And just to your point about the tiny community, you're absolutely right. I think, as we saw earlier in the former presentations, checking what it looks like in different communities, the work that Anan is doing in looking at the differences between Jaffa, Haifa, Nazareth, the small villages, urban society, rural society, that's a key. But Jaffa is not alone. We carried out a second pilot project also in other small cities, in Ramle, in Lod, with very similar results.
Okay, let's hear questions or comments together, 2 or 3, and then Merav could please. Yes. Sorry, I don't know the names. Sorry, excuse me.
My question is about the identity of the Palestinian Christian. Do you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
About that they are more, they study more foreign languages in their school, like missionary school. Like this calls them, they're more close to the Jewish civilization, to the Western civilization, more far from the Muslim Arabs. Do you think that this form of education, the Western education, is helping them to be more close to the West and more far from the Muslim Arabs neighbors in Jaffa or Arab villages?
Oh, sorry.
Right down?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Please.
Just a couple things quick. First of all, I think that both Judaism and Islam have a religious language which is essential for the practice of the religion, whereas Christianity has, over the course of its very long history, sometimes it will claim that, but even the Catholic Church has gotten away from Latin, right? So if that can happen, then any can. And as a historian, Professor Smoha, I have to point out that 50 years is just not enough or 60 years is not enough to talk about assimilation. It took, 500, 600 years for the Christians in this area to Arabize in the first place. So if we're going to look at the long term, of course they're assimilable. I know things are different now in terms of nationalism, but I think that to consider this as a sort of in this very short term, at this very moment, is maybe short-sighted, and that the fact that it's happening in one place and that the priest is willing to consider that 15 years from now, church may be in Hebrew. I think that's a really fascinating finding, and it suggests that there could be an assimilation.
Okay. Please.
Thank you, Merav. Just a very small empirical question. Do you know what percentage of the pupils in Jaffa
are studying in Jewish Hebrew schools, and how many are in Arabic language schools?
Okay, to Edward first. I'd like to remind you what I started with, that the Christians also led the Nahda and the revival of Arabic language, and all the big translation projects, writing dictionaries, so you are absolutely right. Christians do have more access to other languages through the various different schools, and the success of those schools is well known. We've mentioned it in the morning. The Christians, as Professor Smucha said, are most successful at schools throughout the country, compared with not just Muslim, but with Jews as well. So the advantage of education is very clear in that aspect. Regarding Noah, what he said is absolutely right, and I'm glad you saying that. We've been battling with the question of, Christianity and language, Islam and language. We can say, there are a lot of very superficial comments written about the importance of the relation between those languages and the religions, and I think that's I'm still looking for more interesting books that were written about this, because it's a fantastic subject. And the final point, actual percentage, I asked just the priest. I don't have the actual facts. The priest told me that in his own community has 60% children going to Hebrew-speaking schools. In the other communities, there are a lot of Muslim schools, Muslim children going to Hebrew schools as well, and we don't have the exact numbers. It's very hard to actually get it, because schools don't like to cooperate with it. As you all said earlier, if you ask a school principal how many Muslim children, how many Christian children, they say, I don't know. That's always the first PC answer is, I don't know, and I don't care, and further on and on and on. So
okay, second round, please.
Yeah, in a comparative context, in a hostile society, Armenian was forbidden in Turkey as a language in the 17th, 18th century. So they used Turkish characters for prayers. Now that Armenian is allowed in Turkey, but still, because more people know Turkish, so still it's in characters. It doesn't affect your identity. I'm giving you 200 years or 300 years of continuity, but in this case, I'm a sociologist, I'm not a historian. So I think in the particular case of Israel, okay, both societies say nobody wants to be assimilated, they don't want to be assimilated. It's between integration, these are not absolute terms in reality. Integration, it's beyond integration, but it's not yet full assimilation. Linguistic assimilation is not full assimilation. But I agree with Professor Smucha, these are like movements here and there, but the bulk of the society will react to these things as it reacted, because we are critical in Turkey if Armenians pray in Turkish characters. So it can be tolerated in one church or another, but in the end, there'll be a reaction.
Thank you. Many, maybe too many, but please.
Thank you. I just want to look again at the longer perspective of this. If you think that the forefathers of these same Arab Christians in the 7th and 8th century moved very, very quickly from Aramaic, which was their main language, into Arabic without looking back almost. And in the second half of the 8th century, we find liturgy already in Arabic. So liturgy is the Holy of the Holies. That's really like Easter liturgy. So, and I don't think they lost their identity. So it doesn't necessarily have to do with identity. It does have to do with some measure of losing their culture, but not necessarily their identity.
Last one for this round. Yes.
I have two short comments. One is I think that also as a person who works in the field with many children, I think there is a crisis of language in terms of all youth. You know, most children today write their messages even when they talk Arabic in English letters, and they have Arabic in their iPhones, but all the applications are used in English letters. Actually, I know that this is the same thing also among Jewish children. Now, my other comment is I don't see it an assimilation in the aspect of win-lose. I think that we should, as people who have this impact on young people, it should be a win-win game, I think. And I as an English teacher, before being a principal, I think that knowing a language and using it is learning about a culture, and it should be an advantage. And today, even as Arabs, I don't see it as an assimilation. I really agree with Professor Samuha. It's not the point. The point is gaining a knowledge and power and something for interaction, using language for. But living in a country with many languages make the main languages go. A last comment I want to say that it's not only related to living with other nationalities, because if you look at some of the Lebanese channels, they tell the news in spoken Arabic, not even in the language that was once used, spoken Arabic. So even Arabic is getting lost somewhere. So it's not only in Israel.
I agree with everyone. No.
Thank you.
No, seriously, thank you. And Georgia, one of the questions that I was wondering about, and maybe you can tell me later on about it more, is about Armenians in Jaffa who are going through the very similar process. They can't read Armenian. They're now using also Hebrew texts because they don't know Arabic. So that what happens to the two communities between Armenians, between Jaffa and Jerusalem, is quite interesting. But we can leave it for later.
Short comments. Salim. Salim is first. Please.
Seniority. Just one example of some possibility that language doesn't become so essential. In my presentation, I mentioned the Palestinians in Chile, and they lost completely their Arabic. Nobody speaks Arabic anymore, but they still have a strong identity. And I'm just trying to remember what was the explanation of the people who are doing research on them, but it's very clear. But the case is very clear. So there may be cases. And another example, an interesting example, is in there are some schools in Argentina. There are Jewish schools that had the problem of if you teach Hebrew and you teach all the liturgy and the Bible in Hebrew, then you cannot teach enough English, and the parents want the kids to know English. So they now learn the Bible in English. So they decided to renounce to the Hebrew just in order to keep the attachment to the Bible. So nowadays I think that things are changing very much, and perhaps we are still stuck with this notion that language is so central, whereas, as we know, if we look at our kids, this is not the case anymore.
Very short. The one that said that language is not indication of assimilation, you're right. In our research, at least my research, the fact that someone do not speak Arabic and he's Palestinian Christian living in Detroit or Chile or DC, he has very strong Palestinian Christian identity, even so doesn't speak Arabic. And also I agree with Professor Sami Samocha. We're living in a state that will not assimilate the Palestinian Christian or Muslim into society. But there is another aspect that we need to look into it. The aspect is, in order to live in the state of Israel, we have to use the dominant language, Hebrew. in order to get to university, to go to the bank. And as a result, the Palestinian community in Israel, Muslims or Christian, has to, or first language too. In certain, depends where you're living. So in many places, first language at home, it's Arabic, you're right. But when it comes to professional language, they're moving to Hebrew. So in Arab kids, in as you said, with Arab minority like Lud, Ramleh, and Jaffa, the home language is Arabic. Their professional language is Hebrew. And so in order to survive, in order to be able to interact with the majority. But if you live in Shafa Amr, you don't have to do that, or because most people speak Arabic, and you go to the bank, they speak Arabic. So just to, yes.
80% of Arabs in Israel live in separate communities, separate towns and separate villages, and all these villages and towns are run by Arabic, not by Hebrew. So Hebrew is, Arabs in Israel are bicultural, bilingual. They have their first language, their community language, their mother tongue is Arabic, and Hebrew is a second language because they have no choice.
But there is influence.
But there is more. If you listen to a conversation in the middle of Nazareth or Arabic or al-Fahim,
they speak Hebrew.
Between two Arabs, you'll hear, and you are not an Arab speaker, you will understand everything because they are speaking more Hebrew words into this Arabic. This is what
just for example, just to give you a joke, and we'll finish with it. King Hussein stood up in the Jordanian parliament and said, "From now on, I don't want to hear in Jordan Hebrew words." Beseder?
Last comment. You have the last word. No?
I have the last word. I would love to. I think we didn't touch the name part. It's worth looking into more. I need more samples and from different periods, and better not just to count on baptism records, because baptism records are, can be not the real names of people. So the actual names of people is, or the name used, I think, would be leading us even more into understanding the community. Israel is not the only place that has more than one language, and there are loads of other parallels. We might hear a bit of Belgium or other places, or Canada, exactly. And thank you for all the comments.
Thank you.